Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni wili wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and so honored that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. We have two great guests today. A little bit later on, Patty DeDurr will be here to celebrate. This kid can hyperfocus, but first we travel to the United Kingdom to speak to Karl Rowlands to talk about the dreamy wish of a jellyfish. Hey Karl, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
I'm excited. I love the title, The Dreamy Wish of a Jellyfish. Can you tell us about this book?
Yeah, certainly. So, so it's my first book. You know, my kind of world changed, 3 and a bit years ago when I became a dad. So I've got a little boy, and he basically just was fascinated with reading. So all of Julia Donaldson's books, for example, he could practically recite the Gruffalo by age 2. So, I've read him a bedtime story pretty much every night for the last 3.5 years. Just one day while doing that, I just thought to myself, I would love to do this. I would love to write a story that I can read with my son, and obviously that teaches a valuable lesson. And yeah, so I just started that kind of got the gears moving in the head. And it was funny because obviously in the middle of, a global pandemic, in the middle of a lockdown, in the UK, we did, a lot of kind of lockdown quizzes, to pass the time, Zoom, different rounds and categories and so on and so forth. And obviously I was quite a big fan of hosting them quizzes. And one day looking for general knowledge questions, I happened to discover that jellyfish can't sleep because they don't have a brain. So I was like, that's pretty fascinating. And I was thinking, well, how can you dream if you can't sleep? And then therein, the idea was born effectively. So that was kind of what set me off on kind of creating the story. But ultimately the premise of the book is there's a little jellyfish who's in the bottom of the ocean, and, he's really sad because all he wants is to be able to fall asleep because he's always wanted to know what it'd be like to dream. So, as we go through the book, he's constantly saying, I wish I could fall asleep. I dream, I was a kite. I dream that, I could drive a racing car. And he's unbeknownst to him that he's already dreaming, but he doesn't realize it. So he then eventually meets a friendly, hermit crab who teaches him, well, he's been dreaming all along. He doesn't need to fall asleep to have these dreams. Everyone has dreams, and you can make them come true if you go about setting out to do that. And so that's exactly what he does. So, that's the premise.
What a neat idea. And talk about different, how people think differently. I think if I had discovered that a jellyfish doesn't have a brain, my first thought wouldn't be, how can the jellyfish dream? It would be, how does a jellyfish move around without a brain?
Well, yeah, that's probably more of a rational thought, but me being a dreamer.
and that is a beautiful thing. I think just hearing this story would be a great reminder for parents. We're always finding out things with our kids, finding a fun fact either underneath in the bottom of a Snapple cap, which is an iced tea here in the United States, or, on the back of a book or on a website. How neat would it be, once you and your kids find out some knowledge, to then do an experiment like Karl did and just, think, well, how does that fact, knowing this fun fact, what does it make us think of? And where does it send our brains? And I'm betting it could send brains into a lot of fun, different places.
Yeah, definitely. I think, now that it's become a real thing and I'm able to read it with my own son, I've always been a big fan of like Dr. Seuss and the way in some of his books he he spoke to the reader directly, like towards the end of the book, and kind of asked them, like, in the Cat in the Hat, like, what would you do kind of thing. And so I wanted to kind of have that as part of my story as well. So in the last page, there's a line in there that kind of says, have you had any dreams of things that you wished you could do? And it's funny because, like, unprompted, reading it to my own son, he kind of was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, whoa. So, like, I kind of stopped reading the book. I was like, oh, tell me all about it. And he was like, I dreamed I want to be a fireman. I was like, oh wow. So it was, it did everything that I could ever have dreamed of it doing, really, is actually sparking that conversation and that discussion and starting to, help him formulate, the concept of what dreams are, and is there anything he would like to be or do when he grows up.
That is so important. We've talked about it here in the podcast with different guests. There are loads of studies out there that show that kids who have dreams, even if they're changing every hour or every day, kids who have dreams, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a scientist, I want to be a teacher. Those kids do better in school. They're happier, and they are, in some cases, even healthier. And I've shared here that, when I read that, I decided to do a little impromptu, very unscientific study. And so when I would be performing I do educational magic shows, when I'd be performing in a school, I would ask my audience of 400 or 500 or 600 kids, how many kids, just raise your hand, how many kids have a dream? I want to be this or that when I grow up. And at every school, only half of the kids raised their hands.
Wow.
And so I think it's important what you're doing for your son, and I think it's important for all of us to really encourage our kids to dream, to let them know that it's okay for them to dream, and that you're going to be there to help them make their dreams come true.
You know what, that is crazy to me. Like, you would think it would be more people, right? Everyone must have a dream of something they want to do. But I mean, me, I'm from a small town called Skelmersdale originally, and that is a less affluent town. There's you kind of, as you grow up in this town, you kind of a lot of times are told, oh, you won't go on to do things, or you'll just be working in this factory for the rest of your life, or you'll just be doing this kind of thing. And there's kind of this stigma around it. And so that was also another part of, why it was important to me to kind of instill that in the readers, into the young minds, that, you can be whatever you want to be, really.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to actually go after it and chase that dream. So, crazy. I wasn't aware. You would think, obviously, that every child wants to grow up and do this or be this, but only half of the students is a crazy thing.
And again, it was very unscientific, and I might have been phrasing the questions in a weird way. Everybody who listens to this knows that I can sometimes have trouble with the English language. But I do, there are kids out there who aren't dreaming, and they don't have that idea that I can do more. And as you said, growing up in your town, there were a lot of kids that were just told, that's it. You see where your dad and your grandfather, the factory they're coming out of, well, you're going to be doing that in 10, 15 years from now. Yeah,
absolutely. I think, also quite close to my heart, there's a local charity as well, a children's charity called Alderhay Children's Hospital, based out of Liverpool. And obviously, that was another kind of factor for me in wanting to write this. Like, obviously it originated as a story I can share with my son, right? But it was, well, then how can I kind of, give back as well? So, like, obviously there's copies of my book now in that library for, children who are in the children's hospital, like who needs a dream more, to have something to think about and to, hold on to and dream for. So, there's that aspect to it as well. I think the whole premise of the story is just for that, is just to encourage anybody of any background, no matter where they are in life, is to, to go after something and you can make it come true.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that you said earlier on, and it just sparked memories in me. You said that your life was changed forever. And I was expecting you to say when we went into lockdown. But no, you said your life was changed forever when you became a dad. And it absolutely changed for me. I mean, I remember the feeling that I had when my son was born. And I I actually felt like somebody had flipped a switch. And I knew at the moment that he came into the world that my life would never be the same.
Yep. I completely agree with that one. You know, it's crazy because you know, a lot of people, when they like find out, oh, you know, you're going to be a dad, you're going to be a parent and stuff like that, you're super excited and you think about, oh yeah, you know, I'm going to do this, that and the other. I was filled with just immediate like, oh no, what does this mean? Am I going to be a good dad? Like, I've no experience doing this. And, you know, the whole thing just kind of never really felt real to me. But similar to what you said then, as soon as he was born, it was like, light bulb went off moment. And it was like, okay, this is the most important thing in the world, right now. And, you know, it's crazy that, you know, you'd think, have I even found time to write this book? Because, you know, so much of your time becomes just invested in, you know, spending it with, you know, with your child. Like I'm the most boring person ever now. I don't have any hobbies because, you know, when I'm not doing my day job, I'm like, okay, what are we doing today? Are we playing in the garden? Are we going to play, you know, with your racing cars or whatever it is that he wants to do? So yeah, it definitely is the biggest life changing moment I think you can ever have. Oh
boy. Yes, indeed. I was kind of reminded of that memory of, you know, no longer having any hobbies or any interests outside of my family. A buddy was in town and he was real excited to be in Boston and he wanted to, you know, go to the different big sporting events, and he was asking me, hey, when was the last time you went to the Red Sox? And you must go all the time. And I'm like, it's been about 20 years.
Yep.
You know, when I became a dad, just wasn't a priority anymore.
Yeah, I've got this lovely kind of black box sat under my TV, you know, covered in dust. I think it's called a PlayStation. Yeah, I don't know what that even is anymore.
Yeah, I've heard of that
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. I have to ask, you said that your son just absolutely loved when you were reading him books and he could recite one book almost from memory. How's his reaction to the Dreamy Wish of a Jellyfish?
Do you know that you know, he was going to be my toughest critic. I think it was, you know, he can recite the Gruffalo, he can recite a lot of these other stories. Like, how will he even like this book? Will he, you know, go, okay, that's cool, Dad, but I want to read this one. So, you know, surprisingly, he kind of knows this book now verbatim as well. And I think, you know, it's got quite simple rhymes in it. And, you know, it's very much like, oh, I wish that I could fall asleep. My dream I was X. And then it's kind of, you know, that's kind of, you know, repetition to the story as well. So it's quite easy to remember. So yeah, he pretty much, you know, it's definitely in his top 3, I would say, at the moment, of the books that he once read to him every night. But yeah, I think I was just kind of blown away. Not only that he could pick it up straight away and be able to actually say it back to me as well. You know, he's only 3.5. He pretty much knows it, but just that kind of bit at the end where it's like, you know, have you had any dreams? And it's just like, just out of nowhere without any kind of, you know, prompting or anything like that. It was just like, yeah, actually, it was just like, wow. Like, yeah. And, you know, suddenly I end up having this conversation of, he wants to be a fireman. It's like, where did that come from?
That's wonderful. I just love it. Now that you've written The Dreamy Wish of a Jellyfish, have you caught the writing bug?
Maybe a little bit. You know, it's funny. So I'm, you know, notoriously a procrastinator. I've had this list of stuff of like all these varied interests of things that I've wanted to do over like the past, you know, however many years. And it was, I also recently kind of started a podcast like a year or so ago, about pro wrestling of all things. But I kind of did that, and I was speaking to, I had a contractor come into my work and was my boss for a year. And, you know, we were just chatting one day and he kind of said to me, like, you know, you've done it. It's not just an idea in your head anymore. You've got this thing that is out there, and, you know, people can watch it, people can listen to it, and it's a real thing now. And I think that kind of just really resonated with me of all these ideas and things that I want to do that's on my, you know, one day maybe I'll achieve this or I'll do this. It was like, well, let's, you know, just do them. So that's exactly what happened with this book. And now, you know, added to that list is a second book as well as many other things. And, you know, I'm committed to now going about and actually bringing them to life and making them happen.
That's wonderful. You know, since this is a podcast, we might as well give your podcast a plug.
Podcast. It is the A to the K wrestling show. Yeah, I'd like to say we post weekly on a Monday or a Tuesday, but we're very, as I said, I'm a procrastinator, so we post when we get the chance. But yeah.
Well, for any parent out there who has a kid that is into pro wrestling, probably not at 3.5, but when they're getting up to 6, 7, 8, 10, middle school, high school, professional wrestling is all about storytelling. And
it is.
Maybe if you check out Karl's podcast, you'll find out how that seemingly ridiculous statement is true. Hey, Karl, tell everybody where they can go to find out more about you and more about the Dreamy Wish of a Jellyfish.
Yeah, sure. So you can visit karlrowlands.co.uk. The book is available on Amazon, obviously in the UK, the US, pretty much in all territories, really. And you can also follow me on any social medias. So Karl Rowlands Books on Instagram. I'm on Facebook as well, or Twitter. I think I'm just down as Karl Rowlands. But yeah, definitely, drop me a message if you do read the book, or if you read it with your children. I'd just love to hear their thoughts on it and their feedback. Really, is that's the thing that that kind of I'm most interested in, just to see do they have any dreams, and has it created that dialogue between parent and child.
Yeah. We've had a great time speaking to the author of The Dreamy Wish of a Jellyfish, Karl Rowlands. Hey, Karl, thanks for being with us today.
No, thank you for having me. Really good. Thanks.
Before we invite our next guest into the studio, we would love to invite you to connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at readingwithyourkids on Instagram, and at JedleyMagic on Twitter. Of course, you can also go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can click on a contact button to get in touch with us, and you can sign up for our free newsletter. Joining us right now from the Des Moines, Iowa area, our guest today is the author of a great new children's picture book. It's called This Kid Can Hyperfocus. Please welcome to the show, Patty DeDurr. Hey, Patty, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to talk to you about this.
I'm really excited to have the author of This Kid Can Hyperfocus on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. But I have a feeling we're talking about different kinds of kids. Am I right?
Yeah, this kid is a goat, and his name is Kid as well. So it's kind of a play on words that we did with that.
Kid the Kid.
Yes, exactly.
So what is it about Kid that makes him so interesting?
Well, he is on a mission on the farm because it just hasn't been as fun and there hasn't been as much laughter as there used to be. So he's on this mission, and so he kind of gets this hyper-focused drive that some people with ADHD will get when they're on this mission where that's all they want to do is get that goal. So throughout the book, that's his goal, is to make sure all the different animals on the farm, he can bring laughter to them in various different ways. He brings laughter to the different animals on the farm.
Cool. Well, as somebody who has spent the last 30 years traveling around the country, bringing magic and hopefully laughter to kids, what kind of things does Kid do to generate those laughs?
Well, when he gets like the chickens, he slingshots over the chickens. There's a sheep where it's kind of the fall time and there's some pumpkins on the ground and he really wants to know what that feels like. So him and the sheep put the pumpkins on their head because that sensory seeking aspect that some people with ADHD have. He definitely has that. There's a lot of different various things that he does to kind of bring some of the laughters. And
can you give us a look inside? Because we've, in recent years, before I started performing, I was in social work, and this is a long time ago. We're just starting to hear the term ADD and then ADHD a little bit later on. But at that time, there wasn't a lot known about it, and I think we know a little bit more about it. And you said that you struggled with ADHD. Can you kind of give us a little idea of what's that like, what it was like for you?
Yeah, so with ADHD, there's some things you struggle with and some things that you're great at. Some of the struggles have to do with aspects that deal with your prefrontal cortex, which works on your executive functioning skills. So things like working memory, self-regulation, time management, impulse control. There's a plethora of them. So things like that, how people do things neurotypically, like maybe they just like write, meditate or write things down in a journal is a little bit different for people with ADHD, or a chore chart doesn't work for people with ADHD. So you kind of got to get creative in how you tackle things and get things done. When you do have ADHD, because it's not just someone who is hyperactive. There's so much more to ADHD than just being hyperactive. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are pioneers and other people who are just getting messages out there that there's more to ADHD than just hyperactivity. And so there's a whole plethora of things. And also there's positive things. You know, you are creative. Mm-hmm. You are empowered. You're passionate. You have like a zest for life. You know, great sense of humor. So there's a lot of great characteristics as well. Mm-hmm. You just have to kind of do things a little bit different. And that's why, on my website, I put together a whole accommodations list for kids that are in school for executive functioning. So everything from different accommodations that could work in an IEP or 504, from time management to emotional regulation. So I have a whole bunch of different accommodations that could work for kids who are struggling in school. Mm.
That's really generous for you to have done that. Now, these things that you've experimented with either you or your son, and have found that this really has helped my son, this really helped me.
Yeah, a lot of them were things that did help my son, or things we at least tried, and some things didn't help, but I thought, oh, maybe they could help someone else. And this, you know, because my own ADHD, putting this list together was a beast. It was a lot of work to put together, because it's a pretty intensive list. And so, you know, I even went through his past IEP to see what kind of accommodations were used in the past, and then talked to some other parents about accommodations would work for them as well, and just put together like this master list for people to use and to download and take to IEP meetings. And I've had school districts that have reached out to me as well to ask if they could download it to present it to their teachers. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yes, this is what I want. Please, administrators, school districts, take these lists and you know, try to use them and see if they can work with some students that you have.
Yeah. Now, that word accommodations is a word that I'm very familiar with. My wife's been a special needs teacher for over 30 years. I don't know if a lot of other people who don't have a child with special needs is familiar with. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean with the word accommodations?
Okay, yeah. So a kid that may have an IEP or 504, so that's something that you could put like an accommodation on it. So the accommodation would be just a way that the child may do something differently. So instead of the child, let's say, doing a pen to paper task, like handwriting, they may use a computer. That would be an accommodation. Instead of you giving the child a blank piece of paper, the piece of paper may have some fill in the blank, so the child just has to write down key words. And the same with note taking as well. So an accommodation could be getting full teacher notes. So instead of the child having to sit there and try to keep up with what the teacher's saying, they get the full teacher notes, and then they maybe can just highlight as the teacher goes along. And then with accommodations, it's important too, as a child gets older, to take a look at that accommodation, and maybe it could be twerked a little bit. Oh, twerked, that's probably a bad word. But tweaked. I meant tweaked. So then it can be tweaked a little bit, because as the kid gets older, maybe they don't need full teacher notes anymore. Maybe they just need what's called a guided teacher note. So it's kind of a fill-in-the-blank teacher note, so they can fill in some of the keywords and write some things down. So as the kid gets older, the accommodations would change, because hopefully what the point of the accommodation is that it's working, that it's helping the child. So they won't need that accommodation as they get older.
Now, if there's somebody, I hope there's nobody out there thinking, these kids, they need these special, why can't they just why do they need it? You know, but as you were talking about it, I'm looking at myself, and I just got back from the eye doctor's office today, and, you know, they're going to tweak my eyeglass prescription. So they've made an accommodation for me to help me see better.
Yes,
no
exactly.
one in the world would sit down and object to a kid wearing a pair of glasses in class. And I think the same is true if we start understanding that accommodations for a kid with special needs, whether it's using that computer instead of, trying to write out notes, or getting a teacher's study notes and instead of trying to take notes. That's very similar to the child wearing glasses, just helping the child succeed and reach their full potential, which is ultimately better for all of us. Well, I'm excited. I know that your website has lots of resources. You mentioned some of them. Can you tell everybody where that website is so folks can check out those resources?
Yep, it's www.sensing, so like your sensory system, sensinggreatness.com. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I'm starting to do Pinterest, but not quite there yet. It's a lot of work to keep up with all the social media stuff.
Yeah, it is an awful lot of work. And remind everybody the name of your book and where they can find it.
It's called This Kid Can Hyperfocus, and the pre-launch will be in early September, so it'll be on Kickstarter initially, and then it will, once that's complete, it will be on Amazon and all the other major retailers online. Awesome.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of This Kid Can Hyperfocus, Patty DeDurr. Hey, Patty, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Antonio Lumley. He'll be here to celebrate Undercover Ninjas, Brooke and Brass. That's the next episode of the show. Hey, if you're the author of a fantastic children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. All you need to do is to go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the author's Click Here button at the top of the page, scroll on down to be a guest. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Karl Rowlands. Be sure to check out The Dreamy Wish of a Jellyfish. Also want to thank Patty DeDurr. Be sure to check out This Goat Kid. I can't hyper-focus right now. This Kid Can Hyper-Focus by Patty DeDurr. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Michael Murphy, Rory Grady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.